of Suez.
Hello and welcome to this evening's focus. This Monday was a day of mourning for Iraq's Christian community after the weekend massacre in one of Baghdad's biggest churches. The attack was claimed by an organization linked to Al-Qaeda. Militants seized the church during Sunday Mass and took dozens of people hostage. Iraqi forces then tried to stage a rescue, but it turned into a bloodbath with at least 58 people killed. Well, today the Pope condemned the attack, and Iraq's Premier Nouri al-Maliki also denounced it, calling it an attempt to drive more Christians out of the country.
This is all that's left of the Our Lady of Salvation Church in Baghdad. The drama unfolded during Mass on Sunday. Dozens of churchgoers, including women and children, were taken hostage by Al-Qaeda gunmen. In the ensuing standoff, more than 50 people died. Iraqi Christians are often victims of murder and kidnapping. This wasn't an isolated incident, but it stood out for the level of violence used.
This was a horrible attack. It targeted a historical part of this country.
Iraq's Christian community is split into a number of branches, and those churches are among the oldest and most diverse in the Middle East. But congregations are dwindling. Death threats and sectarian violence have pushed many Iraqi Christians to flee the country.
I don't blame the terrorists. I blame the government. The world has to know we're not protected. This is what America's brought us. Thank you, Bush. Thank you, Obama. Thank you, America.
Thank you, USA. Thank you, USA. Thank you, USA.
Before the US invasion in 2003, there were 800,000 Iraqi Christians. Nowadays, nearly a third of them have left.
730 Christians were killed between 2003 and 2009. Thousands of families have been displaced and are still being displaced. Some families are in a very bad financial situation. Since there was no infrastructure in their local area, no economic development, and high unemployment, they naturally started to think about moving abroad.
On Monday, the Pope condemned the violence against Christians in Iraq and urged them not to give in to terror.
I pray for the victims of this absurd violence. I also pledge my affection and presence to the Christian community, once again targeted, and encourage the clergy and the faithful to stay strong and firm in hope.
Meanwhile, Catholics in France prayed for the victims at a special Mass in Paris's Notre-Dame Cathedral.
L'église syriaque catholique de Bagdad a été durement touchée, frappée.
Worshippers were shocked by the news of the attacks.
Christianity in the Middle East will be wiped out if things go on like this, which would be very sad. We have no idea how to stop this slaughter.
3 weeks ago, the Iraqi Archbishop of Kirkuk in northern Iraq visited the Vatican and expressed his concerns about the exodus of Christians from Iraq. Sunday's bloodbath could well see even more choosing to leave.
And joining me now to discuss the situation of Christians, not just in Iraq, but also across the Middle East, is Talal Rajab of the Quilliam Foundation in London, an anti-extremism think tank. Mr. Rajab, thanks for speaking to us this evening.
Good evening.
Can you tell us more about who is the group behind this attack and what their motives were?
The group that is believed to be responsible for the attack is a known Al-Qaeda affiliated group called the Islamic State of Iraq. They have committed various atrocities, not only against Christian communities in Iraq, but also against Shia minority communities there also.
So were they targeting, I'm sorry, were they targeting Christians in particular? Was that their main motive?
I think the main motive was the release of many of their colleagues who are currently languishing in Iraqi prisons. But I think the Christian community at large, not only in Iraq but in the Middle East, is seen as an easy target, maybe due to a lack of protection from their respective governments. I think that's why we saw the attack on the church.
Have we seen many such attacks in Iraq in particular over the past years, targeting Christians specifically as a group?
Yes, I mean, this group, the Islamic State of Iraq, has previously committed attacks on Christian communities in Iraq, so this is not the first. But I think this attack is probably the biggest attack that they have kind of initiated against the Christian community, and it's also against a very historic landmark that is in Iraq. So this is probably the most significant attack to date.
The political instability in Iraq over the past months probably isn't helping the situation, is it?
No, it's not. I think with the fact that we haven't seen a stable government in Iraq since the elections earlier this year has been a slight indication for many militant extremists that Iraq has become a soft target once again, and that the lack of stability there within the government means that more attacks may soon follow.
Many people point to Islamist extremism, Islamism and extremism as one of the causes that's driving people out, not just of Iraq, but also of other Middle Eastern countries. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I think since the war on terror, we've seen vast communities, not only in Iraq, but across the Middle East, who have been targeted. And as I said earlier, they're seen as vulnerable, easy targets. And this has led to a mass exodus from Christian communities who have been in the Middle East for hundreds of years to the Western world.
What are the countries that are most hit by this mass exodus, as you call it? We've seen in the report that the Christian community in Iraq is dwindling. What other countries are concerned?
Well, there's also a massive Christian community in Egypt, for example, who have also been on the receiving end of a vast number of Islamist-related attacks. We're also seeing communities in places like Jordan and Syria who have also been targeted. So it's not just specific to Iraq. I think in the wider Middle East, Islamist extremists have seen Christian communities as a vulnerable and easy target.
Is there one country where you believe this situation is the worst? One country where Christians have the most difficulty living in peace?
I think Iraq is probably the worst country at the moment due to the many problems that it's facing, due to an economic crisis there, due to the fact that it hasn't got a stable government. So Iraq will probably be kind of the worst place off for Christians in the Middle East. But that's not to say places like Syria, Jordan and Egypt are better off.
There have been several incidents in Egypt as well in recent months where Coptic Christians were attacked specifically.
Yes. And I mean, it's something for the respective governments in the Middle East to look at, and it's something that we as an organisation would call for, is for these governments to offer more protection to their Christian communities, maybe bring them and try and bring them more into the political process and offer some sort of protection that would ensure that we don't see a mass exodus of Christians from the Middle East, like we've seen in Iraq, where numbers have fallen from, I think, 800,000 pre-invasion to less than 500,000 today.
And one last quick question, Mr. Rajab. What is generally the consequence for these countries who are losing some old, very established Christian communities?
Well, there's obviously a historic tradition behind many of these Christian communities in the Middle East, and losing that historical prestige is something that I wouldn't want to see from the Middle East. But also for the respective countries, Christians bring a vast amount of business. Many of them own small to large businesses, and the fact that they will be leaving the Middle East would obviously have adverse consequences for these governments.
Well, thanks very much for speaking to us. Thanks for your analysis. Talal Rajab of the Quilliam Foundation, an anti-extremism think tank based in London. Thank you for watching. That was this evening's Focus.